Okay, this is section 2.1D, parallel lines, transversals, and algebra. So the first two questions are a little bit of review from last week. So in the diagram below, if the measure of angle 1 is 79 degrees, find the measure of each numbered angle. So on your picture, I want you to write in the 79 degrees. And then we know that angles 1 and angles 8 are alternate interior angles, so they're congruent. Angles 1 and 4 are vertical angles, so they're congruent. And angles 1 and 5 are corresponding angles, so they're congruent. So angles 4, 5, and 8 are all 79 degrees. Now, to find our remaining angle measure, we have to do 180 minus 79, and we get 101. So that means 1 and 2 are supplementary, so 2 has to be 101 degrees. Now, 2 and 3 are vertical, so they're congruent. 2 and 6 are corresponding, so they're congruent, and 2 and 7 are alternate exterior, so they're congruent. So all the remaining angles are 101 degrees. And number 2, given the measure of angle 2 is 41 degrees, the measure of angle 5 is 94 degrees, and the measure of angle 10 is 109 degrees, find the missing measures. So I'm going to zoom in for this one. So 2 is 41, 5 is 94, and 10 is 109. So you have to be careful with complex diagrams like this. So our two lines that are parallel are right here, which means that 4 and 10 are not congruent because they're not on the same transversal intersecting the parallel lines. But we do have this relationship. We know that the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3 is the same as the measure of angle 5. So together, 2 and 3 make 5. So we can find 3 by doing 94 minus 41. And that gives us 53 degrees. So 3 is 53 degrees. Now for the measure of angle 4, 4 and 5 are supplementary. They're a linear pair. So we can do 180 minus 94, and that gives us 86 degrees. So 4 is 86 degrees. Now we know 4 and 1 are corresponding angles. So 1 is also 86 degrees. Now don't make this mistake. 1 and 6 are not congruent. So and also 1 and 7 are not congruent. If it helps you, just cover up this line, and we can use this information to help us find the remaining angles. Now, 10 and 7 are corresponding angles, so they're congruent. So 7 is 109. Now to find 8, we can use the fact that 2, 7, and 8 are all in a triangle. So we could do 180 minus 109 minus 41, those two angles together to subtract. So we get 30 degrees for 8. Next, we could use the fact that 8, 9, and 10 are all add to 180 because they all form a straight line. So we know the measure of angle 8 plus the measure of angle 9 plus the measure of angle 10 all add to 180 because they're all that straight line. So we can do 180 minus 109 minus 30 gives us angle 9, which is 41 degrees. And then lastly, we need to find the measure of angle 6. So 6 and 7 form a linear pair, so we can do 180 minus 109, which gives us 71. So 6 is 71 degrees. So if we're going to fill in our answer blanks, we can go, it's 86, 86, 109, 41, 53, 71, and 30. Okay, our new stuff. So we have 2 learning goals this unit, or this section. I can make conjectures about the measure of angles formed by 2 parallel lines in a transversal. I can, when given 2 parallel lines cut by transversal, solve for missing angle measures and justify my reasoning. So, in number 1, if L is parallel to M, find the values of each missing variable. So that is going to be key, knowing that we have those 2 parallel lines. So on our picture, we can mark those with arrows, letting us know that they're parallel. And because they are parallel, we know that we have corresponding angles, and corresponding angles are congruent. So our equation is that 5x minus 2 is equal to 58. Next, we can add 2 to both sides. So we get 5x equals 60, divide by 5, so we get x is 12. On number 2, again, we know that L and M are parallel. Our 2 angles we have here are alternate exterior angles, which means they are congruent. So our equation is 16x plus 22 equal to 134. And then we just solve. So minus 22 from both sides. So we have 16x equals 112. Divide by 16. So we have x is 7. Okay, number 3. Need to be really careful. Do you guys see this arrow here? It's pointing to this angle right here. And the 125 is talking about this angle. So these 2 angles, when we have our parallel lines, L and M are parallel, are alternate interior angles, which means they are congruent. So 7x minus 1 equals 125. They're going to add 1 to both sides. So we have 7x equals 126. Divide by 7. So we have x is 18. Okay, number 4. This time we have this arrow pointing to this angle, and the 133 is talking about this angle. When we have our parallel lines, these 2 angles are on the same side and on the inside, so this is consecutive interior angles. These 2 angles are going to add to 180 because they are supplementary. So we have 9x plus 2 plus 133 equals 180. Next, you're going to combine like terms. So we have 9x plus 135 equal to 180. Then you're going to subtract 135 from both sides. So we have 9x equals 45. Divide by 9. So we have x is 5. Okay, flip the page. We have just a few more on the other side we have to do. Okay, number 5. So if L and M are parallel, we can mark that with our 2 arrows. So we have 8x minus 7 and 3x plus 38. These 2 angles are alternate exterior angles, which means they are congruent. So we're going to set them equal to each other. So we're going to get our x to one side, so you're going to subtract 3x from both sides. So we have 5x minus 77 equal to 38. Then we're going to add 77 to both sides. So we have 5x equals 115. Then we're going to divide by 5. So we have x is 23. Okay, number 6. If L and M are parallel, our 2 angles here are corresponding angles, which means they are congruent. So 11x, so corresponding angles. So 11x minus 47 equals 6x minus 2. So we're going to get our x's to one side, so subtract 6x from both sides. We have 5x minus 47 equals negative 2. Add 47 to both sides. So we have 5x equals 45. Divide by 5. And we have x is 9. Okay, number 7. So for number 7, we have 13x minus 21 and 5x plus 75. These 2 angles are alternate interior angles, which means they are congruent. So we're going to set them equal to each other. So the first thing we're going to do is get our x's to one side. So I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. So we have 8x minus 21 equals 75. Then we're going to add 21 to both sides. So we have 8x equals 96. Divide by 8. So we have x is 12. On these last 3 problems, what you could do if you want to double check if your answer is correct, you could plug your x in to your angles, and if you get the same measure, then you know you did it correct, because you should be able to plug in and get the same number back for each angle because they're congruent, so it has to be the same. Okay, number 8. We have these 2 angles here, which are consecutive interior angles, which means they're not congruent. These 2 angles are supplementary. So that means we're going to take them and add them together and then set them equal to 180. So, and you can even tell from the picture, because here's our 2 parallel lines. And then we have one acute angle and one obtuse angle. And so you know that they can't be congruent, which means they're more than likely going to be set equal to 180 once you add them together. Our next step is we're going to combine some like terms. So we have 9x plus 5x, which is 14x. And then negative 33 plus 3, which is negative 30. Then you're going to add 30 to both sides. So we have 14x equals 210, divide by 14. So x is 15. On this one, when you double check, you're going to end up getting 2 angles that add to 180. So you won't have the same answer, but your 2 measures would be able to add it to 180. So we can even plug in and see. So if we did 5 times 15 plus 3, That gives me 78. And then 9 times 15 minus 33. That's 102. Together, 78 plus 102 is 180. So you know it checks. On this last one, we can check. So 13 times 12 minus 21 gives us 135. 5 times 12 plus 75 is 135. So they match. So again, one simple way, take your calculator, just plug back in and see if your answers are reasonable. So on these two, they add to 180, it's reasonable. These two are congruent, reasonable. Okay, last problem for the notes. So we have two angles with x that are alternate interior angles, so that add to 180. And then we have this expression with a y, and that is going to not be congruent to the other angles. So that's supplementary to the other ones. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find x. So to solve for x, our two angles are alternate interior angles, which means they are congruent. So we set them equal. We're going to minus 6x from both sides. So we have 2x minus 31 equals 3. Add 31 to both sides. So we have 2x equals 34 divided by 2. So x is 17. Now, when you go to set up your equation, it does not matter which angle you plug into, because if you did 8 times 17 minus 31, we get 105 here. And if you do 6 times 17 plus 3, that's also 105. If we look at these two angles right here, they are consecutive interior angles, which means they add to 180. And if you look at your two angles here, they are a linear pair, which means they add to 180. So our equation, either way, if you do consecutive interior angles or the fact that they're a linear pair, it would be 5y plus 35 plus 105 equal to 180. If you combine like terms, we have 5y plus 140 equal to 180. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Minus 140 from both sides. So we have 5y equals 40 divided by 5. So we have y is 8. So if we were to plug in 5 times 8 plus 35, that would give me 75 degrees. And if we put that down here, let's double check. Does this make sense? So our two angles that are across from each other are both 105. That makes sense. Our two angles right here, they add to 180, which makes sense. And our two angles right here, they also add to 180, so it makes sense. So that's just one quick way to double check your answers and see if your answer is rational, like if it's reasonable.